Good evening and welcome to El Oso Fumar Takes. I'm Barry Duplessis, as always, live from the Casa Cueva studios of Euless, Texas. This is our 53rd take. Year two has started, year two of El Oso Fumar Takes, and we are kicking it off with a huge bang. So excited to welcome in our first guest of year two for our 53rd take. And without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Jeff Borysiewicz of Corona Cigar Company and Florida Sun-Grown Tobacco. Jeff, how you doing tonight?
Bear, thanks for having me on the show. We're doing fantastic.
Jeff, I'm so excited that you could join me tonight, and appreciate it. Difficult time frame and all for you, and we really appreciate that you could join us on this Sunday evening. And it's so sensational that I could finally get you on the show. I'm just so excited to talk to you about a number of different things. We could probably stay here all night for all the things I want to talk to you about, but we're gonna try to narrow it down and focus it in a little bit. But I had the pleasure of briefly meeting you, of course, at this year's IPCPR show, and you probably shook about 10,000 hands. So I was one of the 10,000, and was really excited that you agreed to come on the show and everything. But
well, I love your hat, man.
yeah, this really cool guy that I'm talking to gave it to me, so decided to sport and represent. Absolutely,
looks good.
It's a really, really great design. And I was actually, speaking of the hat, the lettering is definitely similar to the labels, the letters on the FSG label.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you come up with the rest of the design, like the red crown and items like that? Where did the inspiration come from there?
There's two different logos. That hat is what we call the FSG tobacco hat. That's the logo for the farm itself. Now, the cigar you and I are smoking right here, that's the FSG by Drew Estate. So that's a different logo. What that is that the FSG is the brand of cigars by Drew Estate. The FSG that you see on the hat, that's the trademark logo for the tobacco and the farm itself. So that's why they're somewhat similar, but not exactly the same. So, for example, if we have like our Corona 20th anniversary and other cigars that use FSG tobacco in it, so we'll use that logo that's on your hat on any cigar that has the tobacco in it. So it's sort of like if you buy a computer and it says Intel inside. If you buy a cigar that has FSG in it, you'll see that logo in it.
Oh, that's awesome. So you started this project a while ago, and we'll get into it in just in a minute. But one thing I wanted to talk to you about was you started before FSG, the cigar that we were both smoking by Drew Estate was launched. And this cigar, for all intents and purposes, kind of really put FSG, the brand, on the map and everything. But you've done some projects before in the past. In fact, you I met one of your general managers, Tommy, on the Davidoff trip last year in February, and he was very kind and gave me one of the Davidoff FSGs for one of your anniversaries that you guys did. And you guys have also you got also a cigar that was just released by Davidoff for a national release as well using FSG.
Yes.
And you also are working with Aganorsa. And is there anybody else that I'm missing?
Yeah, there's 4 factories that the tobacco goes to. And the one that you hadn't mentioned was J.C. Newman. So we send that to the J.C. Newman's factory in Nicaragua, where they do the fermentation and leaf processing, the sorting, stemming, then send it back to Ybor City, Tampa, where they make the American cigars, which are soon to be released by J.C. Newman. They use their, and that's the cigar that has wrapper on it that's from our farm.
I am so excited about that. And I'm really excited about the project as well. Angel's Army.
Army of Angels.
Army of Angels.
Yeah, that's from Aganorsa. So basically, the 4 factories that have the tobacco, those are the 4 that we work with and we're going to continue to work with. Aganorsa does their Corona 20th anniversary, our Intensa and Army of Angels, and that's they use our FSG filler in that. And Aganorsa's got a special place in my heart because Eduardo Fernandez is a farmer, and he's been growing tobacco in Nicaragua for a long time, and has a lot of acres there. And he was very important on getting the FSG project started. And we used he gave me the seeds, the Corojo seeds that we use for our tobacco came from him. So that was the genesis of our seed bank.
It's terrific. Had you tried different seeds previous, or this was something you wanted to give a go right with Eduardo, and that's the seed that you guys used?
Well, we started our very first crop, 2013. We used Corojo 98. I'm sorry, Corojo 99 and Criollo 98, both seed varieties. Those are the two main Cuban seed varieties that are grown in Cuba and in Nicaragua. And so we tested both of those seeds, and they both performed great. So, but I personally prefer the taste of Corojo tobacco. It's the most common tobacco when it comes to great flavor profile. However, it's a small leaf and doesn't give much yield. So a lot of people don't like to grow it. But if you talk to the cigar makers, they love it. That's the coveted seed that people like to use. But as far as farmers go, they don't like to use it because the leaves are small and they just don't produce a lot of yield per acre. So we've only used those two varieties, but ever since in 2013 test crop, we've been using strictly Corojo 99 for all the other crops. And we did do a test crop using heirloom Florida Sumatra seed tobacco. We grew that in 2014, a fall crop. And that's the tobacco that went to Davidoff.
So stay on top with the project with Aganorsa. You know, this is a project that's named after one of your guys who's been with you for a very long time on the retail side, I believe.
Yeah, the Army of Angels with Angel Benitez.
And is he starting to work with you at the FSG farm as well, or is he strictly still on the retail sector?
No, Angel is the general manager of Corona Cigar, the entire company. So he's got an extremely important role in Corona Cigar, and you know he's a cigar enthusiast, passionate about it, and so Angel asked if we could do a cigar, and so we made one specially for him. So that's what that's for. That's his blend. It carries his name on it, and you know that's his cigar.
That's fantastic. It's really awesome when you can partner with a lot of. I mean, we partner with so many great people in this industry. We meet so many fantastic folks. And when you have such a great relationship with him is for over so many years, like your relationship with Angel, it has to be very rewarding from your perspective to see that kind of project come to fruition. When you kind of talked to him about this and it kind of came off the assembly line, so to speak, and he saw it for the first time, can you describe what his reaction was?
Well, there's a process involved. So we worked with Paul Palmer and Aganorsa. So, you know, he worked with different blends and came up with stuff that Angel really liked. He likes full-bodied cigars. So it was, you know, it's the flavor profile that he was looking for. And, you know, there's a lot of things that have to come together, though, besides having a great cigar. You know, we wanted to make sure the packaging was right. We wanted to make sure the theme of the cigar was right. We wanted to make sure that, you know, the bands and everything turned out great. So, you know, it was a team effort. And you know, he was more than ecstatic with the quality of the cigar and the total package when it came out. So we're so glad to see that. I mean, you know, Angel's a great guy, and you know, it's nice to be able to have a cigar that you can hand to people that's your blend and has your name on it.
I mean, that would be a dream come true for me. So I just can't imagine what a thrill that was for him to be so involved in the process and actually for it to bear his name as well. That's just incredible. And taking a little bit of a turn here though, Jeff, your voice carries a lot of weight in this industry because you have been a part of so many different parts of the process. You know, you've erected this amazing retail giant when it comes to the cigar industry with the Corona Cigar Company, and now you're delving into the manufacturing, growing side of tobacco as well. So you've got a lot. You wear a lot of hats, and you've got a lot of irons in the fire to kind of mix my metaphors here. But the question I wanted to ask is your voice has been pretty loud on a lot of issues that really affect our industry as a whole, particularly with the FDA regulations and everything. And again, with your voice carrying so much weight, it's a voice that a lot of people listen to. Do you think that your leadership in this arena was cultivated and developed because of your background in retail, or do you think it really came more about because of your when you started expanding your expertise and expanding your arenas that you are, since you do have so much influence in a bunch of different ways within the industry?
Well, it started when I was with retail, because that was 2007 when I got involved with politics. I had never been involved in politics before because I just never, had a need for it, let's say. But then it was an eye-opening situation for me and every other retailer out there and every other manufacturer back in 2007 when the S-chip cigar tax was proposed, and this was a major deal because of the way S-chip was written. It had it raised the cigar tax from 5 cents to up to $10. So, so, so this was a big deal. And the floor tax was the one that was a major issue for a retailer, especially a retailer carried a lot of inventory, because the way the law was written, it would have required us to write a check for well over $1 million just for the tax. And I didn't have the $1 million to write the check to the government. We were building our store in downtown Orlando at the time. I just signed a lease for 7 years. I just signed a contract that was well over $1 million just to build a place. And my banker pulled the loan because of this bill that Nancy Pelosi was driving really hard. Back then, George Bush was the president. He kept vetoing it, and honestly, George Bush's veto is what saved Corona Cigar Company. Actually, John Boehner was the speaker, but they almost had the votes to override the veto. They were like 14 votes shy. So
yeah, it was really close. I remember
it was really close. So if it wasn't for the diehard Republicans and George Bush, I would have been out of business. So I had to get involved. This was in the IPCPR. I was a board member. I don't think I was a board member at the time. I think I came on board after that. But it was they had no lobbying team. They had no presence in Washington D.C. Matter of fact, the organization was headed up in Columbus, Georgia at the time, and we had no assets on the ground there other than David Berkebile, and then and the guys. Oh man, there's a few other shops in DC there. Mike Coppermore was in business back then too, and so we had some issues that we had to work through. But we were able to get it changed. I mean, we got the floor tax taken out by going up there. Rocky Patel would go up there with me, and Bobby Newman and a whole bunch of others. Marvin Samuel even moved up there for a year from Drew Estate, and so I got involved in a leadership role more out of desperation because we had to. It wasn't an option for us. So that's how I got involved with the politics there. So hang on one second, Barry.
Sure.
So those were the situations that we're in. We were able to, with a lot of effort, we were able to get the language changed. We were able to get down to 41 cents, which was still a big impact for the industry, but it was a livable situation for the industry versus a catastrophic situation that would have driven out. If we didn't get that cigar tax reduced, and if we didn't get that floor tax removed, half of the retailers would have been out of business instantaneously. So that's how I got involved in politics. That's when Keith Park from Prometheus and God of Fire Cigars, Keith Park and I formed CRA, got Cigar Rights of America off the ground, and with the help of people like Carlos Fuentes Sr. And others that stepped up and started writing the checks that it was needed to get us going, we made it happen. And ever since then, the CRA for the last 10 years has been a very, very effective lobbying organization in Washington, D.C., as well as the IPCPR. So both organizations had to, just really step up and learn the process, and now they're very, very good at what they do.
Yeah, I've had the privilege of interviewing Executive Director Loop on a couple of occasions, and he has a very difficult job, and he does a very good job with it, as does the entire organization and IPCPR. Completely agree with you there. You said you weren't really involved in politics until this point. And not trying to get too off topic or anything, Jeff. I'm interested. Just really quickly, did you have any interest in politics? Like, at all, or was it kind of just
No.
again like it was just a point of desperation and this just had to happen and then you just got up and went?
Let me tell you, my first lesson in politics came from Stanford Newman. That's Eric and Bobby Newman's father. He was alive at the time, and I remember we were doing an event with him at our Sand Lake store, and this was probably back in 2000, maybe 2004. And I remember Stanford Newman. Now this guy was in his late 80s at the time, and has second generation, third generation actually, um, third generation car. Second, it was second for him. So anyway, the company's been in business for 125 years. Let's put it that way, right? So
Yes.
the family's got tons of historical experience and perspective on this. And I remember Stanford Newman saying to me, he goes, "Jeff, are you involved in politics?" And I said, "No, I said, I can't afford that." And, and he goes, "Man, you need to get involved in it." He goes, "I'm telling you, even on the local level," he goes, "you need to start, when these political, campaigns and stuff start reaching out to you." He goes, "It's only like $250 for these contributions." He goes, "You should do that just so you have, so you're active in it." And I never took his advice until I got, this problem happened. But once this S-chip problem came up, that's when I became extremely active. But the downside of that is that, politics is expensive. You've got to, everybody can vote. There's no doubt about that. But when it comes to politics and you have good people in Congress or in the Senate that have your interests at heart, you've got to support them, because every 2 years a congressman's up for election. Every 6 years a senator's up for election, and these campaigns are extremely expensive. So, if they're there to help you on your situations, later on, when their campaigns season kicks in and they need help, you need to answer the call, because otherwise, it's a two-way street, and that's just the way politics work, unfortunately. But I'm still real active in politics, and this election cycle here it's concerning. I know we've got Democrats and Republicans that love to smoke cigars, but unfortunately, there's a very active group of Democrats that are very anti-tobacco, and they're constantly wanting to raise cigar taxes and push this FDA regulations through as if we're as if we're the cigarette industry, and that's another problem too. Is we got big tobacco companies that are not our friend. Call Angel, please. All right. All right. Go ahead, Bear.
No, I was going to say, I was you were the subject of a conversation I had once with some people in this industry, and it was kind of half joking, half serious, of a discussion when it was actually mentioned the person most likely outside of like people like Director Loop, who actually is involved in politics day to day and everything, but what cigar celebrity or cigar personality most likely uh, would run for political office and do really well, and your name came up, and I happen to agree with that. All right, do you think there's any time in the future that where you could run for office, like for Congress, Senate, or something like that, to try and take your influence to a higher level?
Well, here's the issue with that: is that a lot of people talk about members of Congress that they don't work a lot. Um, hang on a second. I've got something going on at the store right now.
Sure, absolutely. We're talking here with Jeff Borysiewicz of Corona Cigar Company in Florida Sungrown. While he takes just a brief moment, we're going to go ahead and just take a quick break here and kind of reset. But we really appreciate Jeff's time as he's sitting down and as always, incredibly busy, even working even working during the interview. And
I'll tell you right now,
really
what's happening is I got a store with a fire alarm going off right now.
Oh my goodness!
So
oh my goodness!
It's not a fire, but anyway, listen. We're open 7 days a week. We have 4 locations, and we're open 364 days a year. So listen, we handle this stuff, but we're not always live doing interviews when we handle it.
Of course. Life happens when you least expect it, and always continues.
The good news is the store's not on fire, so
that's
it's just
good.
a matter of
Fantastic.
Getting a landlord to shut off a fire alarm that's making customers leave a store because it's loud. But anyway, back to the political thing. Here's the issue about that: is that congressmen, people joke about senators and congressmen, oh, they're taking a 30-day vacation in August. If you're involved in politics, you see how much these guys work. They work nonstop. I mean, especially during campaign season. A lot of these guys, especially our senators, have been in office way too long. But these guys are sometimes 70 years old, and they're running around their state, 7 days a week, constantly, going to fundraisers and, meetings and everything else. So the part that a lot of people don't understand when it comes to politics, these guys work. It's an incredibly tough job with lots and lots of hours. And there's no way you can raise a family, in my opinion, and be involved as a congressman or a senator. I mean, a lot of them have families, but at the end of the day, they're not home with their kids. They don't get to watch them grow up. I mean, they're in Washington half of the year, then they're back in their state half of the year. And when they're back in your district, you're constantly doing meetings and everything else. So it is a huge sacrifice. At this time, it's not something I'm interested in doing. Later, when my kids get out of school and stuff like that, maybe I would consider it. But that's the biggest thing. It's just unless you can, and that's why a lot of congressmen that I think where they can keep their families together, because you'll notice the divorce rate's high on the younger congressmen too. But once their kids get out of school, and if their wives can be involved with them and go to Washington, D.C., I've seen it's a much better situation. So, for example, Bill Posey, who's introduced our bill for 3 sessions of Congress. He's a friend of mine. His wife Katie, she goes back and forth to Washington with him all the time. Now I've had another congressman that was a friend that was, in D.C. and his wife had young kids, and they didn't travel together, and it's just, it's very tough. It's that's why I think it's better for folks once their kids have grown up. So we'll see what happens later in life.
Well, for the record, you would have my vote, Jeff. So just so we got one in the till already.
All right, I appreciate that.
So you mentioned, and you have such great reverence for the politicians with the amount of energy and the time and everything. And I actually was having another discussion, a separate discussion with a fellow retailer of yours, both know very well, and he said that Jeff Borysiewicz had unbelievable, relentless energy. And he used the word relentless very emphatically. And I've repeated it several times in describing you in a number of different avenues. When I reviewed one of your cigars, I used it. I've used it in describing the show that we're doing tonight. And for all the time that you dedicate to your amazing business project at Corona Cigars, now with FSG, I have to ask the question, where do you get the energy that you have to do all of this?
That's easy. If you're passionate about what you do, the energy just follows. Like I said, Corona Cigar is a 7-day-a-week project. It doesn't stop. Like I said, it's Sunday night, and I'll get texts and stuff from the stores. It's not often, but it does happen. And remember,
or fire alarms just going off.
Yeah, and we're open till 2 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays, and that's again 4 locations. So you never know where things can arise. But when you love what you do, and passionate about this industry, I'm passionate about cigars, and I have a passion for agriculture too. So the farm itself, that's a true passion project because Corona Cigar is very successful when it comes to retailing. And the one thing about growing cigar tobacco in Florida, you cannot do it it's not a profitable in business. There's no way to grow cigar tobacco in the United States the way we grow it, which is when you're growing Cuban seed tobacco, you have to prime it. You can't stalk cut it. Now the stalk, let me explain the difference here. When you're up in Connecticut or in Pennsylvania or in Kentucky, when they grow the broadleaf type of tobaccos, they cut the whole plant down. So you send a harvesting crew through the field one time, chop the stalk down and hang the whole plant. Now the other thing is, we talked that there's a reason that broadleaf is called broadleaf, because the leaves are 26, 28, sometimes 30 inches long.
They're huge.
They're huge. The size of Cuban seed tobacco, whether it's Corojo or Criollo, runs on average around 16 to 19 inches long when it's green. When it dries, it's going to be 15 to 17 inches long when it's cured. So the weight of one leaf of Corojo is so much lighter than one leaf of broadleaf. So when you, and tobacco is sold by the pound. So what happens is when you're growing Connecticut shade tobacco, which is harvested one leaf at a time as well, and harvesting Cuban seed tobacco, like what we grow, harvested one leaf at the time, we have to send the harvesting, we have to go through the fields to harvest those leaves 8 times. So we have to do it 8 times versus going through, when you do broadleaf, you do it once. And that's why it's so expensive to grow Cuban seed tobacco in the United States. That's why no one grows it. And then as far as the shade, which also has to be done one leaf at a time, that's why there's only one farm left in the United States that's doing it, up in Connecticut. It's just too expensive. So the farm is a passion project. We cover our costs. And that's what took, believe it or not, all the work we do on pushing, all the brands that we make with FSG tobacco. It's all about just keeping the farm sustainable, because there's a big annual budget that we've got to cover, and that's covered through the sales of the tobacco and the cigars. But that's all we do is we cover it. It's not, we don't want to lose money, but we certainly don't make any money, because if we made it, I mean, listen, this FSG in Florida and in Texas, this is a $14 cigar. If we started to try to make money on the tobacco, the price of these cigars is going to go up. And I'd rather have the cigars to be as affordable as possible and keep a sustainable farm than have it where we're trying to drive a profit with the farm, and then it's just going to get too expensive. Everything's about, you just can't raise prices where, there's a reason why we're the only farm in Florida that does it. It's just because it's just too expensive.
Absolutely. It's an impressive project that you've built down there in Claremont, Florida. You've taken us on several tours with some of the videos that you've done. And, farming in itself is not a cheap venture for anyone. Farming for any kind of crop that we're talking about.
Yep.
And again, you just explained beautifully the difficulties and everything, the facilities that you have at FSG are unbelievable. I mean, you guys have absolutely spared no expense in putting together some of the best technology, the best facilities to make sure that the very best product is getting to market. And it's interesting that you mentioned about the price, because I was actually having that discussion with a consumer a few days ago and he was explaining, he's like, why is a cigar that's got tobacco from the United States, more expensive than some of these other cigars from other places? And I was like, you don't really understand. I said, you don't really understand how it works. And
there's a quick answer to that, and I'll tell you what a lot of people don't realize is that, when you're paying labor in the United States, 1 hour, the labor cost in the United States for 1 hour cost you more than what the labor costs in Nicaragua and Honduras are for a farm worker for an entire day. That's how big the price difference is. So, when you see those kind of, we're talking like it's labor costs are almost 40 times more here than what it is in Nicaragua. So that's why all the farms are in Nicaragua. That's why all the farms are in Central America, why they're in Dominican Republic, because it's just that, labor costs are so much cheaper. And that's why the Florida cigar industry, that as far as the both the handmade industry and the Florida tobacco farms, that's why they're all gone. There's only one factory left in the United States, and it's J.C. Newman in Tampa, in Ybor City.
It's in danger of closing.
Yeah, it is, and that's my point. Is that I hope that everything's going to work out with FDA regulation, that factory is going to remain, because we fight like crazy to protect it. Because in my opinion, the way what I've used this analogy in politics a lot is that when we're up there in DC talking to congressmen and senators about getting behind our bill that exempts premium cigars from FDA regulation. They always ask, well, how many jobs is there? How many American jobs? There might be 300,000 people involved in the cigar industry between Honduras, Dominican Republic, and Nicaragua, but none of those are American jobs. So if you are a U.S. congressman, you're not going to sign on to a tobacco related bill that doesn't protect U.S. jobs. Now, if let's say you're a congressman from Montana and you're presented with a bill that protects the last factory, the last cigar factory in the cigar city of Tampa, he can get behind that bill because it's just like a Florida congressman can get behind a bill that protects the last car company in Detroit or the last brewery in Milwaukee. These are American companies, so people from throughout all over America support when they see one particular industry getting put out of business through either government regulation or whatever. Other people around the country will rally behind it. So you have to have that American component. Because pretend you're a congressman right now, right? And they say, hey, you sign on to a bill that protects premium cigar companies, but it doesn't protect any American jobs. They're going to say, well, you're putting, public health up, as a backseat to, jobs in Nicaragua. That doesn't win campaigns. That doesn't, that's a perfect attack ad. So that's why, it's so important for the American farmers, the farms up in Connecticut, the small cigar manufacturers that are out there. There's a few, where they have 2 or 3 rollers type of thing, and then the J.C. Newman factory in Tampa, because it's America used to have thousands and thousands and thousands of cigar factories. These things went away in the last 125 years. So it's an industry where you want to save. There's no reason to have a government entity put the last factory out of business. It's not needed.
With a historic building like the J.C. Newman factory, you would think that, and the mainstream media in Florida, is particularly in Tampa, has actually been pretty good about publishing a lot of positive news articles about it, and it's really been fantastic to kind of get positive media attention from mainstream media in that regard. The thing that I find the most fascinating to me is that politicians, as you said, if I was a congressman, I would get petitions and discussion points and people coming to see me day in and day out about save this and save that, and it's a topic that comes up quite a bit, and preserving history in this country, while in certain circumstances takes a backseat to a lot of things. There are a lot of programs, and there are a lot of people that go a very long way to protect historical buildings and historical monuments and other items. And it is so shocking to me that they're willing to let this go by the wayside simply because of the anti-smoking lobby. And it just blows my mind how completely far off they are on the mark. Because honestly, it's not even about the cigars being manufactured.
Right. You have to remember the groups that oppose us, though. You're talking about the American Heart Association, the American Lung Association, the American Cancer Society. These are, and Tobacco Free Kids. These are groups that have a lot of money, a lot of lobbying power. And so, we're not even close to the influence that these guys have. So that's, this is a major opponent that, while their primary target is cigarettes, and now, vape is on the radar. We're just, I was in a Senate meeting one time, and this retired senator was explaining it to one of his colleagues, and he's like, "This is like 2 dinosaurs, giant Tyrannosaurus Rex fighting. One is big tobacco, and one is the health groups, and they're in the middle. On the jungle floor is this little industry called the premium cigar industry, and these guys are getting destroyed by this fight." And that's a good way to put it, because we are collateral damage. End of story. The premium cigar industry is so small. It doesn't even register as far as the amount of dollars that go through the cigarette industry. So it's in Washington. There's they look at the big picture, big items. It's very rare that you can have something as small of an industry as we have that has been successful at advocating and is making as much noise as we have. And the reason being is that the story is true. I'm going to give you a quick story. I was at I was knocking on the door at Harry Reid's office back when he was the Senate president, and I didn't even have a lobbyist. It was just me, and trying to get a meeting. And I remember his senior policy advisor getting back to me, and then Rocky Patel and I and several others, we ended up meeting him and had dinner with him. And he goes, the reason I took the meeting is that when he looked at my business card, he goes, I saw this business guy coming in from Orlando, Florida. Wasn't a lobbyist, wasn't a think tank, wasn't some political action organization. And he goes, that's how we know when there's something wrong. He goes, that's when we know that there's something in a bill that's not right. When you have an individual business owner coming in, knocking on doors saying, hey, this is what's happening. And so that's why they, a lot of times you can't even get a meeting. So that was a very eye-opening experience. Now listen, you need lobbyists. There's no doubt about it. You need lobbyists, but the lobbyists also need the real stories. It's a team effort. You got to have both. You got to have lobbyists with the connections, but you got to have the clients that have real stories, like the J.C. Newman factory, like Curl Cigar, like every other retailer that's out there in the country. It doesn't matter if it's a small business. Matter of fact, sometimes that's even better. If you're a member of Congress from, let's say, whatever, San Antonio, Texas, and he knows that this shop owner there has, 3 or 4 cigar shops, let's say Tiffany Rumbo, and he'd be like, I know your dad went back, Ralph Rumbo type of thing. You'll be surprised how these things pop up, because when it comes down to, there's a saying, says all politics are local, and it's true. When it comes down to your district, one small business in your district is enough to make a congressman say, you know what, I did this for my constituent. I did it because I don't want to see that little cigar shop that we drove by for the last 50 years on Main Street. I don't want to see them closed up. And that's how you win the argument.
I've actually written Tobacco Free Kids a couple of times, requesting an interview with the director, offering him a fair platform for debate.
It's not going to
happen. On the particular issue of premium cigars. It's not.
It's not going to happen.
But it's entertaining to think about, at least.
Well, I'll tell you why it's not going to happen. Because they know that the story that comes from the premium cigar industry is the truth. They're not going to face that, because what they do is they hide behind these studies that are, they lump cigarettes with it, and they know that the story on the premium cigars doesn't hold water. That's why you're never going to interview with them, ever, because they already know. They've done their studies that show kids don't smoke premium cigars. So he's not going to talk to you, but it doesn't matter. They're funded. They have a mission. Their mission is to abolish all tobacco. So that's why they're not going to talk to you or me or anybody from the cigar press.
I think that you're absolutely right, Jeff. I think that the inherent problem is not just the fact that they're hiding, and it's not even the fact of their absurd position on tobacco. And it's a problem that I've heard you say several times in other arenas, and I think it's something that just runs rampant in this country, is that no one's willing to listen to each other. And we've done plenty of forced listening to their side of the argument, because they're the ones with the money and they're the ones leading the charge, and we're the ones on the defensive. But they have actually spent no time listening to us. And it's probably the most infuriating thing ever. But I'm going to keep on trying. And maybe one day I'll hit the lottery too.
The good part is there's a lot of elected officials that have listened to us. That's why Absolutely. Each time that our bill gets introduced, you have 100, 160, 170. We've had 218 co-sponsors of a bill. That's enough votes to make something pass. But, when you have a Speaker of the House at the time that was John Boehner, and Altria doesn't want our bill to get voted on, it's not going to get voted on. These are the big forces that we've had to deal with. So, but the good part is that I can tell you this: since we've been active, you haven't seen another federal cigar tax proposed on premium cigars Trust me, Dick Durbin and his group wants to. He's got a coalition of about 8 other senators that are truly anti-tobacco for everything. They always try to throw up proposals for increasing the federal cigar taxes. Doesn't get anywhere. You don't see any additional anti-cigar regulation or let's call it anti-cigar legislation being getting any traction in the U.S. Senate or the House. So we are winning on that front, and as long as we continue to keep this line of communication with our elected officials, that's our best defense. Right now, we're fighting things, trying to undo things that occurred a decade before we got active.
The thing, what every cigar enthusiast and member of this industry is secretly strongly wishing for with all their might is, it seems like every year for the past few years, and this is a positive thing. It stinks because they always ends up getting thrown out, but wording to protect and exempt federal premium cigars has gotten added to the federal budget on a number of occasions in other bills. Right. And then at the last minute, it seems to get tossed out. As you said earlier, we're such a small industry, and it's really mind-boggling to me that that's the one thing, and not the one thing, because literally hundreds and thousands of things get picked out and thrown away and tossed to the side. I don't want to be a whiny baby about this, but one of these days, I'm just hoping that they just overlook it and they miss it and it gets pushed through.
They won't miss it, but when you have the health groups that will make a phone call to Speaker or Nancy Pelosi, and then Big Tobacco that makes a phone call to Paul Ryan, things will stop, and that's the issue, and that's the reality of what's going on. But all we can do is continue to fight and hope that there's a bigger issue that Altria needs to cash their chip on instead of the premium cigars. You follow me?
Absolutely.
That's the key.
So turning a little bit positive note here, going back to FSG, this amazing project that you guys have built with wonderful tobacco, the FSG cigars by Drew Estate, projects with Aganorsa, J.C. Newman, and Davidoff. Resurrecting what was at one time a glorious industry in Florida. Now, you told us earlier about why it's difficult and why there's only one farm still growing tobacco in Florida, and that's yours. Do you see FSG tobacco being something that, okay, let's take the politics that we've talked about all interviews so far. Let's cast it aside for just a second. On just product alone, do you feel that FSG tobacco has a place, a vibrant place to grow in the future of this industry?
Yes, but I don't see us growing any more tobacco, put it that way. We go for 5,000 pounds, 6,000 pounds a year. If we were to grow more tobacco than that, it would require more tobacco barns. It would require a much bigger labor expense as well. And remember, because we don't make money on the tobacco, it doesn't make sense for us to try and grow more than what we do already. The whole idea was to keep it sustainable, not to make it big, but make it sustainable, something that can continue year after year after year. That our farm team that's been with us for since 2013, that these guys can continue to have a viable project that they're working on, and just keep it year after year, because that is the trick right there. And do I see that happening? For sure, because the brands that we use the tobacco in are very successful. People they rally around the concept of this, of bringing back American cigar tobacco that's from Florida, even though it's in a small way. But here's the thing. I've been approached by so many other farmers too. You have to understand, farming is difficult as it is. Whether you're growing watermelons or growing citrus or whatever, the struggles are real. And so a lot of these guys will say, hey, how can I grow cigar tobacco and make it profitable? And I tell them, you can't. The only reason we do it is because we own Corona Cigar. We've got the ways to sell these cigars and promote the cigars, and it funds the farm. You have to realize we've put well over $1 million just in capital investment in the farm itself. Every tobacco barn you put up is $150,000. John Deere tractor, $75,000. You start adding up these costs, they're real costs. So it's not, there's a reason it went out of business, and there's a reason it's not going to come back. But we're doing it more for the reason of bringing back a lost leaf that, you know, we did it, we can do it, and we'll continue to do it. But it's the industry itself is never going to come back. And it's just like in Connecticut with the shade. I don't think it's ever going to come back, because you've got Ecuador that's growing it at a fraction of the price. You got shade being grown in Nicaragua at a fraction of the price. So, what can you do? It's just, that's just the way it works, unfortunately. But we're doing our part to bring it back, and we're going to continue to carry that torch. And is God willing that the consumers can continue to support cigars that use FSG tobacco. That's the key.
Cigar tobacco is grown in a few states, very few states in the United States. Florida now being another one, Kentucky, Virginia, Connecticut, most famously, and a little bit of Pennsylvania as well, in Lancaster County specifically. There's also some being grown in Wisconsin that you really don't see you haven't really seen in mainstream shops and everything. Tobacco, since you are so familiar with the crop itself, it is so very, very particular. Do you see any other states in the United States that could potentially take the strategy that you have? Now, again, it's not a money-making strategy, but possibly grow it in other states. And what other states would those be?
Farmers got to make money. That's why it won't happen. The farmers have to make money. The only reason there's Kentucky burley grown is because it's used in other forms of whether it's chewing tobacco or snuff and things like that. Virginia and Carolinas and Georgia, it's because it's in cigarette tobacco. Connecticut is all cigar tobacco, and right now the market is great for broadleaf, thank God. So as far as Pennsylvania goes, yeah, they grow it, but there's not a lot, and it's used for cigars as well. Sells for the because cigar tobacco and cigarette tobacco are two different things. Cigarette tobacco is really cheap, and and these guys that do grow it, Philip Morris dictates the price, and they when it comes to agriculture, they just make sure that the farmer makes enough money to stay in business so he can plant next year, never to get ahead. So it's a tough business, and that's why I say farmers are always looking for some way. They're very optimistic people. You cannot be a farmer unless you're optimistic. So every year they're hoping, that next year's even better and whatever. And the agriculture industry as a whole, as soon as the price goes up on some segment, whether it's corn or soybeans or beef, whatever, everybody starts doing it. 3 years later, the price falls down. It's all about supply and demand. So I don't see it ever. Now, there's, like I said, the cigar tobacco in Florida was around for 150 years. It went out of business just because of the cost. And they used to grow cigar tobacco in Maryland. You mentioned Wisconsin. They grew it in Canada. So, there were a lot of places. But remember, there were thousands of cigar factories all across America. And so, you watch the old Clint Eastwood movies and stuff, and you see, you go to the saloon and they all get cigars. That's the way it was. So there were cigar factories in pretty much every town. That's not the case anymore. So that's why, while I love what Drew Estate's doing, what it's done with, the Connecticut barn smokers and the Kentucky barn smoker and Florida barn smokers, to show that there are still a few pockets in this country where, premium cigar tobacco is grown. But I don't foresee any other. What we've done in Florida, it can only be done if somebody was willing to do all the work and put up a lot of money and not make any money. That's a tough ask. You know what I mean?
Tough sell, yeah.
Yeah. So that's why.
I think it's so special what the folks in Connecticut, Pennsylvania, of course yourself in Florida are doing for this industry specifically. That I'm as a consumer and the cigar nerd, I'm hoping that someone takes the risk and takes that tough sell in other states, because I'm always I'm always anxious to try something different, something new, and I think it's really exciting for this
One
industry.
one of the neatest looking cigar tobacco. See, the books I have that I had to study too were all from like 1890s and 19, usually about to 1908. And it's interesting which states grew cigar tobacco. There's a variety called Maryland shoestring tobacco. It's very unique. It's got a long leaf that's like a broadleaf, but it's skinny. And I always thought that would be kind of cool to grow, but I don't think that's going to happen in Maryland. Maryland's that's a tough state to do business in as it is, you know. But
Just
but
get Under
anyway,
Armour behind it.
yeah, I
It'll
guess,
happen.
but they won't do that. But that's yeah, it'd be cool if it happened. But I mean, unless somebody, like I said, wants to invest a ton of money and do a ton of work for and not be paid for it, because I don't think it's going to happen.
It is a tough sell. Real quick, I have one question I definitely want to get to, but I want to take another turn here because I remember something that's really special about Corona Cigar Company is not only the amazing cigar selection that you guys have in your stores, but also the incredible bars that you have, and your love of things boutique and things special, like Florida Sun Grown Tobacco and all the other products that you carry in the cigars. You do have an incredible array of different cocktails and liquors, particularly single barrel whiskey seems to be something that you're very fond of. Was that something that you were fond of personally that you decided to bring in to your stores, or was this something that some of your partners were talking about, some of your employees, some of your customers? How did that, I don't want to say craze, but how did that become such like a staple inside Corona Cigar Company?
It happens because I'm a cigar enthusiast. I love cigars, right? So I know what pairs well with cigars, and when our first store that had the full liquor bar is in downtown Orlando, and we're surrounded by nightclubs there, and everybody around, man, they're all were pouring all these back in 2000, man, I think it was 2006, 2007, when we were opening that up. All of the bars around were doing, flavored vodka was the big thing, sour apple martinis and this, that, and the other. And you could, every flavor in the world. So I was like, listen, that's not what you pair with cigars. And my wife's from Scotland. And so whenever I go to Scotland, I'd always go to the distilleries and the history of single malt scotch is, I mean, we talk about the history of cigars. The history of single malt Scotch goes back even further, and it's a very craft industry, if you will. There's distilleries all over Scotland, but each distillery's whiskey tastes different, which is amazing because they all use the same ingredient, which is single malt barley. But different stills and different yeasts and different barrels and all this other stuff makes a difference. So when we opened our first bar, I was like, listen, while everybody else is going after the martini bar fad, if you will, I
Mm-hmm.
said, we're going straight up whiskey, brown spirits. All I want to have where you can see is nothing but brown spirits, which means single malt scotch, bourbon, cognac, and dark rums. And that's what we focused on. Now, what happened is, I remember when the guys from Zazarak came with their portfolio of bourbons. No one had even heard of Pappy Van Winkle. And we'd get all we wanted. Eagle Rare, Blanton's, all that stuff. Matter of fact, we even did a cigar promotion with Eagle Rare where the liquor stores would get a free Corona cigar was attached to the bottle of Eagle Rare bourbon. So things have changed so quickly once people got onto that bourbon craze, which was good for us too, because that's what we did. We were ahead of the curve. But I don't even want to call it a curve because pairing, Winston Churchill wasn't drinking a sour apple martini when he was pairing it with a cigar. The man was drinking scotch. And if you go back, 100 years, we don't reinvent the wheel. That's the thing that we do. We look at what goes right with what we do. So that's why the brown spirits work so well. And that's why the other thing, we made an incredible investment because a lot of a lot of the whiskeys we have are very expensive, especially when you start getting into these old scotches. Um, we've got some Macallan scotches that are, we got 55, we got 60, we got 62. Now they're talking about a 70-year-old Macallan coming out. These things are expensive. When I tell you expensive, I'm talking about stuff that costs us $30,000 for a bottle. So very expensive whiskey, $3,000 an ounce. But listen, not everybody's, we might, sell, you know, 5 or 6 drams of that a year. But what's important is that we have it. So what I like to do is when you come to Corona Cigar, that I don't want to say there's no limit, but if somebody really wants something special, we got it, and you'll be surprised, man. People, you can have somebody come in that's. I remember one time during there was a duty free show in Orlando, and some Russians that own the duty free stores there, they came in and they cracked the bottle of Macallan 62, and that's because they sell that, but in order for them to drink it, they're having to crack a bottle. It's $30,000. So instead, they come to us. They buy 3 drams of it and spend $7,000 or $8,000. And so it lets them.
It's a bargain.
Yeah, it's a bargain, I guess. Right? You're allowed to you can have it without having to buy the whole bottle. Plus, these things are used for celebration, right? Imagine if you're like when Shaquille O'Neal's playing for the Orlando Magic, and if he just signed a $30 million contract, what's a $3,000 shot of 64, 65-year-old Macallan? It's you're celebrating, right? And so that's what this is for. These are for the special occasions. So that's why we have that stuff at all of our bars. We have a huge selection of whiskey. But then again, we have stuff that's not crazy priced. We have a lot of single barrel bourbons that we do, lots of them. I remember 2000, I think it was 2007. We did our very first one. It was with Jack Daniels was just starting a single barrel program. You go to the distillery and taste all the different single barrels that they think are exceptional, and then you pick out your own barrel, pair it with cigars, type of thing. So when we started that, next thing you know, we're probably up to 20 different single barrels of bourbon. And not only just bourbon, we've got rye whiskey from Canada, from Crown Royal, that's in a single barrel. We've got Patron tequila, single barrel Patron that's actually finished in American rum barrels, which that's not available on the shelf anywhere. So we have a lot of one-off type of things. Maker's Mark, we have a private selection of there. Not only is it a single barrel, but also has it's finished off like a Maker's 46, but instead of using the combination of wood staves that's used for 46, we use our own custom combination of wood staves that make it pair well with cigars. So we've got really cool whiskeys that are truly one of a kind.
I've had the privilege of actually seeing one of the menus of Corona Cigar Company, drink that, and I've actually been to 2 years in a row now. I've been to Louisville, Kentucky, for a conference, and been into some really, really fine establishments with extensive menus. And the menu of Corona Cigar Company rivals or tops these menus of people in bourbon country. And it's incredibly impressive what you've been able to put together.
Well, there's a reason for that. I'll tell you why. Because, every time you buy these special barrels of whiskey, it's expensive. Every time when you buy it, you buy the entire barrel, and a barrel of whiskey is not cheap. So it's a big capital investment. And so most bars aren't going to do it. Or if they do, they might do 1 or 2 barrels. Remember, every time you do that, that's $7, $8, $10, $12,000 worth of whiskey that you're buying at once. So if you do 10 barrels, that's, you're $100 and something $1,000 in the whiskey there. So it's all, it gets expensive. But, I built Corona Cigar Company, started out of my house, and been doing it for 22 years now. And I've always believed in just reinvesting in inventory and in the stores, to make it the best for the consumers. And that's what we do. So that's why you don't see that kind of selection a lot of places, because it's just so expensive. But I believe in what we do, and I want to have a great place for people to enjoy cigars and enjoy whiskey, and that's why we do it.
And that leads me, that's a great segue into my final question for you, Jeff. And I realize this might be a very simple answer for you. But I realize one would not exist without the other. But as I mentioned at the very beginning of the show, you have built two amazing entities. One, you might be considered a giant. Corona Cigar Company is a retail giant. And we've mentioned how small FSG is in terms of an operation, drop in the bucket, but what it's been able to do and the imprint that it's made and the impression that it's made on the cigar community. If you won't say it, I will, has made a lasting impression on consumers, manufacturers, and retailers alike. So from where you sit, I have to ask, which are you most proud of?
That's a tough question. I tell you what I'm most proud of is the team that we have at both Corona Cigar and at the FSG farm, because you know you none of this works without having a great team of people that believe in what we do, and that's the biggest thing, is that we have, whether you're a cashier at a store or sales associate or working in the marketing department or whatever, everybody's got to believe in the vision of what we do, and um, that's what I really am the most proud of, is that these ideas that we come up with, that the team rallies around. And whether it's in the farm or in the bars or whatever, if you're making a cocktail, we want to make it the best you can make it. Best, we want to be the best at it, right? And people, they have pride in what we do. And the farm is another thing too, where when you're growing cigar tobacco, they understand the final product, that it's going to be in a cigar like this that people are going to smoke and enjoy. And when people are happy about it and bragging about the cigars, that you made that, you were part of that, you grew that. Or when people write a nice review on Yelp or something like that, that they mention the person by name that took care of them. That's what I'm the most proud of, and I like being able to see folks that I've got a lot of people that started with us from day one, and to see their careers grow and to see the company grow, and then to see that there's a future as well, that we never want to stop growing, because if we stop growing, the opportunity stops growing for our staff. So that's that's what I'm the most proud of.
My general manager at Michael's Tobacco, Tracy Spence, said that his greatest accomplishment out of all the relationships that he's built and all that he's accomplished as a general manager for Mike Peacock, Michael's Tobacco, is that he feels he's assembled one of the best teams in the industry. And sounds like you feel the same way. And it's, as a member of a team, and for your leader to say that of you, for me, gives me unbelievable pride. And I know that your people feel the same way. Had the privilege of meeting several of them, and I know they feel the same way that I do when I look to my leadership at Michael's. And so, and that I know that truly means a lot. So I really appreciate. Yes, sir.
One more thing. What else is really good about it too, is that the folks that are part of Corona Cigar, they love cigars and they love what we do. They love the industry, and that's when you have people that get it. You know what I mean? That understand what this is all about. It's very rewarding as well. And so I love the cigar industry. I love what we do, and it's a great group. The clientele that you meet, the people you meet, the passion that's out there. I'm just glad. I'm glad to be part of it.
Well, we're certainly glad you're a part of it too, Jeff. For everything that you've accomplished, we really appreciate, and all the hard work that you do on all the many hats that you wear and all the irons in the fire. Again, mixing metaphors. We really, really, really appreciate it. And I, for one, greatly appreciate all the time that you gave us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We really, really, really appreciate it.
No problem, man. Enjoyed it. And all I can say is, guys, keep smoking FSG. We, keep the project going, man. It's been a great ride. We thank everybody for the support.
yes, everyone out there, continue to support FSG. If your local retailer is not carrying FSG, please ask for it so that Jeff can continue to help make incredible cigars and put them on your shelves as well. So we really appreciate Jeff's time this evening. We appreciate all of you tuning in. All your likes, shares, and comments are always appreciated. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check us out on Facebook for upcoming guests. We will have Luis Cuevas for our 54th take next week. It'll be an exciting one, so you definitely don't want to miss that. So hit the subscribe button on your YouTube channel and check us out on Facebook for other upcoming guests. Again, we always appreciate your likes, shares, and comments. And we most greatly appreciate the time of our esteemed guests, like our guest tonight, Mr. Jeff Borysiewicz of Corona Cigar Company and Florida Sun-Grown Tobacco. For everyone out there, we really do appreciate it. Again, my name is Barry Duplessis. This was El Oso Fumar Takes, our 53rd take, the #1 take of our second year. We greatly appreciate it. Live from the Casa Cuevas studios of Euless, Texas. And as always, we'll see you next time.